A small rural village in Kenya, surrounded by green hills and whispering trees, a young girl was born. Her name was Wangari Maathai. At that time, no one knew that this girl would one day change not just her country, but the entire world. A childhood close to nature. Wangari grew up in a place where nature was everything. The rivers were clean. The trees were tall and strong. The land was alive. As a child, she spent her days playing near streams, watching birds, and helping her family on the farm. Nature was not just around her. It was part of her. The first signs of change. But as the years passed, things began to change. The trees started disappearing. The rivers became weaker. The land slowly lost its strength. At first, no one noticed. But Wangari did. She saw something was wrong. Something important was being lost. A curious mind. Unlike many others, Wangari was curious. She asked questions. Why are the trees disappearing? Why is the land changing? Why is no one doing anything? But answers were not easy to find. Because sometimes, the biggest problems are ignored. Wangari believed that education could help her understand the world better. So she worked hard in school. She was determined. Focused. Different. At a time when many girls were not encouraged to study. She refused to stop. And her determination paid off. A journey beyond home. Wangari got an opportunity that changed her life. She traveled abroad to continue her education. She studied science. She learned about the environment. She understood how nature works, and how it can be destroyed. And most importantly, she realized that change was possible. Returning to a different reality. When Wangari returned to Kenya, she expected to see the same beautiful land she had left behind. But what she saw shocked her. The forests were smaller. The rivers were weaker. The land was struggling. And the people were suffering. The women who carried the burden. Wangari noticed something important. Women were walking long distances for firewood. For water. For food. The loss of trees was not just an environmental issue. It was affecting daily life. It was affecting survival. The idea that changed everything. One simple idea came to her mind. Backhand index pointing right, what if we plant trees? It sounded simple. Too simple. But sometimes, the simplest ideas are the most powerful. Wangari started encouraging women to plant trees. At first, people were unsure. They didn't believe it would make a difference. But Wangari believed. She always believed. And slowly, people started joining her. Tree by tree. Hope began to grow again. The woman who refused to stay silent. Wangari was not just planting trees. She was planting change. She was speaking up. Standing strong. And challenging a system that ignored the environment. But when you challenge powerful systems, they don't stay silent. After returning to Kenya, Wangari Maathai could not ignore what she had seen. The land was suffering. The people were struggling. And the silence around it was dangerous. So she decided to act. A simple idea turns into action. Wangari didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait for leaders. She didn't wait for change to come. She created it. She gathered women from nearby villages. She spoke to them. She listened to their struggles. And then she shared her idea. Backhand index pointing right, let's plant trees, together. At first, it seemed too simple. But the women understood. Because they were the ones carrying the burden every day. The birth of a movement. What started as a small effort quickly became something bigger. Women began planting trees in their communities. They worked together. They supported each other. And slowly, green life began to return. This was the beginning of the Green Belt movement. More than just trees. But this movement was not just about trees. It was about empowerment. It was about giving women control over their lives. It was about restoring dignity. Every tree planted was a step toward independence. A step toward strength. The growth of hope. Villages that once struggled started to change. The land became healthier. Water sources improved. Food became easier to find. And most importantly, people started believing again. Believing that they could change their future. The system begins to notice. But as the movement grew, so did attention. Not all of it was positive. Powerful people began to notice Wangari. And they were not happy. Because her movement was not controlled. It was independent. And independence can be dangerous for those in power. Criticism started slowly. People in authority questioned her work. They said, "This is not necessary. This is not important. This is not your role." But Wangari did not stop. She continued. Because she knew the truth. From environmental to political. What began as an environmental effort was now becoming political. Because planting trees was challenging the system. It was exposing corruption. It was showing that change was possible without power. And that made leaders uncomfortable. The pressure increases. Soon, resistance became stronger. Meetings were questioned. Efforts were blocked. Support was reduced. Wangari was being watched closely. And the message was clear. Backhand index pointing right, stop, or face consequences. The woman who refused to stop. But Wangari Maathai was not afraid. She had seen the problem. She had started the solution. And she was not going to walk away. No matter the pressure. No matter the risk. The trees were growing. The people were changing. Hope was returning to Kenya. But at the same time, danger was rising. A movement that could not be ignored. The Green Belt movement was no longer small. Thousands of trees had been planted. Communities were transforming. Women were becoming stronger and more independent. And now, everyone was watching. The government feels threatened. Leaders in power started to worry. Not because of trees. But because of influence. Wangari Maathai was becoming a voice. A powerful one. She was speaking about corruption. Land misuse. Environmental destruction. And this made her dangerous. From activist to target. At first, they tried to ignore her. Then they tried to discredit her. They called her names. They spread false stories. They tried to make people doubt her. But it didn't work. Because the people had seen the change. They had felt it. The first direct confrontation. Soon. The pressure became direct. Officials tried to stop her projects. They blocked land access. They tried to shut down her movement. But Wangari stood strong. She refused to step back. The courage to speak truth. Wangari Maathai began speaking more openly. She criticized powerful leaders. She exposed decisions that were harming the environment. She stood in front of crowds. And spoke the truth. Even when it was dangerous. And then. The consequences began. She was threatened. Harassed. Even attacked. But she didn't stop. Because she knew something important. Backhand index pointing right, if I stay silent, nothing will change. A symbol of resistance. For the people. She was no longer just a leader. She was a symbol. A symbol of courage. A symbol of truth. A symbol of resistance. And symbols are hard to destroy. The movement grows stronger. Despite all the challenges, the movement kept growing. More trees. More people. More voices. And with every step forward, the system felt weaker. The storm ahead. But the fight was far from over. Because when power is challenged, it fights back harder. Stronger. More aggressively. And soon, Wangari Maathai would face her biggest challenge yet. The movement was growing. The voices were rising. But in Kenya, power was not ready to lose control. The moment of confrontation. Wangari Maathai was no longer just planting trees. She was now standing directly against powerful forces. She protested against illegal land grabbing. She spoke against the destruction of forests. She challenged decisions made by those in power. And this time, the system responded. The first arrest. One day, during a peaceful protest, everything changed. Police arrived. Orders were given. And suddenly, Wangari Maathai was arrested. The crowd watched in shock. Because all she had done was speak the truth. Violence against peace. The situation escalated quickly. Peaceful protesters were pushed. Beaten. Forced to leave. Chaos filled the streets. Fear spread among them. But even in that moment, Wangari did not break. A fearless stand. Even after being released, she did not stop. She returned. Stronger. More determined. Because for her, this was no longer just about trees. It was about justice. The women who stood with her. And she was not alone. Women from villages stood beside her. They protested together. They protected the land together. They faced danger together. Because they believed in her. And in the future she was fighting for. The cost of resistance. But courage has a cost. Wangari Maathai was attacked again. Insulted. Threatened. Her life was no longer safe. But she refused to run. A message to the world. Her struggle began to gain attention. People outside Kenya started noticing. Media started reporting. Her voice was spreading. And the world began to see. Backhand index pointing right, a woman standing against power, alone, but unbreakable. The symbol becomes stronger. Instead of weakening her. The attacks made her stronger. Her courage inspired more people. Her story reached further. And her movement became unstoppable. The fight continues. But this was not the end. It was just the beginning of a bigger fight. Because when truth spreads, it cannot be controlled. And soon, everything would change. After facing arrests, violence, and constant threats, many thought Wangari Maathai would step back. But they were wrong. She didn't slow down. She rose, even higher. From local voice to global symbol. What started in villages of Kenya was now being heard around the world. Her work with the Green Belt movement was gaining international attention. Organizations, leaders, and activists began to notice her courage. Because her fight was not just about trees anymore. It was about justice. Human rights. And the future of the planet. The world begins to listen. Wangari was invited to speak on global platforms. She shared her story. Her struggles. Her vision. People listened carefully. Because her words were real. They came from experience. From pain. From courage. A message that inspired millions. She spoke about protecting the environment, empowering women, standing against corruption. And her message spread quickly. Across Africa. Across continents. Across the world. She became a voice for those who could not speak. Recognition and respect. Awards began to follow. Recognition grew. People respected her work. Not because she was powerful, but because she was brave. Because she never gave up. Even when everything was against her. The movement grows beyond borders. The impact of the Green Belt movement expanded beyond Kenya. Communities in other countries started adopting similar ideas. Planting trees. Protecting land. Empowering people. Her idea was becoming a global movement. Still facing challenges. But even with recognition, the struggle was not over. Back home in Kenya, she still faced resistance. Criticism. Opposition. Because real change always faces resistance. The strength within. But Wangari Maathai had changed. She was stronger. More confident. More powerful. Not because of titles. But because of her impact. A leader for the people. She continued working with communities. Listening to them. Supporting them. Leading them. Because she never forgot where she started. The next big step. Her journey was far from over. Because something even bigger was waiting. Something historic. Something that would change everything. Years of struggle. Years of resistance. Years of courage. All of it was about to lead to something historic. A journey built on courage. Wangari Maathai never worked for awards. She never fought for recognition. She simply believed in one thing. Backhand index pointing right, do what is right, no matter the cost. From planting trees in villages of Kenya to standing against powerful systems. Her journey was built on courage. The world takes notice. By the early 2000s, her impact was undeniable. Millions of trees had been planted. Communities had transformed. Women had become empowered. And her voice had reached the world. The historic announcement. Then came a moment that changed everything. In 2004. The world heard her name. Backhand index pointing right Nobel Peace Prize. Wangari Maathai was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. She became backhand index pointing right the first African woman to receive this honor. A victory beyond one person. This was not just her victory. It was a victory for the women who planted trees. The communities that believed in change. The people who stood against injustice. It was a victory for Africa. And for the world. The meaning behind the award. The award recognized something powerful. That protecting the environment is connected to peace. That fighting for nature is fighting for humanity. And Wangari had proven it. The moment of pride. When she stood to receive the award. It was not just a ceremony. It was a message. A message that even the smallest actions can change the world. Still grounded, still strong. Even after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. Wangari Maathai did not change. She stayed simple. Focused. Committed. Because her mission was not over. The work continues. She continued planting trees. Speaking up. Leading people. Because for her, this was never about awards. It was about impact. A legacy in motion. Her story was now inspiring millions. Across continents. Across generations. But even then, there was more to come. After receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, many thought the journey of Wangari Maathai had reached its peak. But for her, this was not the end. It was a new beginning. A voice that could not be ignored. Now, the entire world was listening. Her speeches reached global platforms. Her ideas were discussed in universities. Her story inspired books, documentaries, and movements. Because she was not just a leader anymore. She was a symbol. Inspiring the youth. Young people across Kenya began to follow her path. They planted trees. They raised awareness. They spoke up for their communities. Because they had seen what one person could do. And they believed they could do it too. A movement that never stopped. The Green Belt movement continued to grow. More communities joined. More trees were planted. More lives were changed. It became more than a movement. It became a legacy. Beyond borders. Her influence spread far beyond Kenya. Countries across Africa and beyond adopted her ideas. Environmental protection became a global conversation. And her name became known everywhere. A leader who stayed humble. Despite all her success, Wangari Maathai remained humble. She continued working with ordinary people. Listening. Helping. Guiding. Because she never forgot where she started. The power of one idea. Her journey proved something powerful. Backhand index pointing right, one idea can change the world. A simple act like planting a tree can start a revolution. The challenges still remained. But the world was not perfect. Environmental destruction continued. Injustice still existed. And the fight was far from over. The responsibility of the next generation. Wangari believed the future was in the hands of the youth. She encouraged them to protect the planet, to stand for justice, to never stay silent. Because the next chapter was theirs to write. A legacy that lives on. Even as time passed, her impact grew stronger. Her story became a lesson. Her life became an example. And her legacy became eternal. Years of courage. Years of struggle. Years of impact. Now, the life of Wangari Maathai was entering its final chapter. A life of purpose. Even in her later years, she did not slow down. She continued to speak. To guide. To inspire. Because for her, this was not work. It was a mission. A responsibility. The quiet strength. As time passed, her energy changed. She was not always on the front lines anymore. But her presence was still powerful. Her words still inspired. Her ideas still moved people. The personal battles. Behind the strength. There were personal struggles. Health challenges began to appear. But she faced them. With the same courage she had shown all her life. Quietly. Bravely. Without fear. Still inspiring the world. Even during difficult times. Wangari Maathai continued to inspire. She met young leaders. She shared her experiences. She encouraged others to continue the mission. Because she knew. The movement was bigger than her. The emotional moments. Those close to her saw something special. A woman who had given everything. Yet expected nothing in return. A leader who had faced danger. Yet remained kind and hopeful. Her journey was not just powerful. It was deeply human. A legacy in every tree. Every tree planted was a reminder of her work. Every empowered woman was a symbol of her impact. Every voice raised for justice was part of her legacy. The world prepares to say goodbye. And then, a moment came that no one was ready for. In 2011, the world lost a legend. Backhand index pointing right Wangari Maathai passed away. A loss felt everywhere. The news spread quickly. Across Kenya. And across the world. People mourned. Leaders paid tribute. Communities remembered. Because this was not just the loss of a person. It was the loss of a voice. A powerful one. But not the end. Even in loss, there was something powerful. Because her story did not end. Her work did not stop. Her impact did not disappear. The news spread like a wave across continents. In Kenya, people stood still. Some in silence. Some in tears. And some, in deep thought. Because the world had just lost a woman who had changed it forever. A nation in mourning. In villages where trees once stood tall again because of her. People gathered. They remembered the days when they had nothing. And how she had given them hope. Women who once walked miles for firewood. Now stood beside forests they had grown themselves. And in their eyes, there was gratitude. And loss. The women who carried her dream. For many women, Wangari Maathai was more than a leader. She was a voice. A protector. A guide. She had given them strength when they felt powerless. She had shown them that their actions mattered. That their voices mattered. That they mattered. And now, they carried her dream forward. A global wave of respect. Beyond Kenya. The world reacted. Leaders from different countries paid tribute. Environmental organizations honored her work. Activists spoke her name with respect. Because her impact had crossed borders. She had become a global symbol of courage and change. The message that stayed alive. Even after her passing. Her message did not fade. It grew stronger. People continued to talk about protecting the environment. Standing up for justice. Empowering communities. Because her life had proven that these were not just ideas. They were actions. Her work lives on. The Green Belt movement continued its mission. Trees were still being planted. Communities were still growing. People were still being empowered. Because a true movement does not end with one person. A legacy in every corner. In cities. Her name appeared in schools and institutions. In villages. Her story was told to children. In forests. Her impact could be seen in every growing tree. Her legacy was not just remembered. It was lived. Every day. The power of memory. Memory is a powerful thing. It keeps stories alive. It inspires new journeys. And in the case of Wangari Maathai, it became a source of strength. People didn't just remember her. They followed her example. A story that inspired generations. Young people who never met her felt connected to her story. They read about her. Watched her speeches. Learned from her journey. And many of them decided. Backhand index pointing right, we will continue what she started. The emotional truth. There was sadness. There was loss. But there was also pride. Because the world had been lucky to witness her life. To learn from her courage. To be changed by her actions. The real meaning of legacy. Legacy is not about how long you live. It's about what you leave behind. And Wangari Maathai left behind something powerful. Hope. Strength. Change. Inspiration. The world that she helped shape. Today, conversations about climate, environment, and justice carry her influence. Movements across the world reflect her ideas. Her voice still echoes. In every act of courage. In every planted tree. In every person who refuses to stay silent. Some stories end. But some stories become timeless. The story of Wangari Maathai is not just a story of the past. It is a story of the future. A seed that became a forest. It all started with one simple idea. Backhand index pointing right, plant a tree. A small action. A quiet beginning. But over time, that single idea turned into millions of trees. Millions of lives changed. Millions of hearts inspired. A life that redefined leadership. Wangari showed the world that leadership is not about power. It is about purpose. Not about control. But about service. She proved that even one person can stand against powerful systems. Some stories end. But some stories become timeless. The story of Wangari Maathai is not just a story of the past. It is a story of the future. A seed that became a forest. It all started with one simple idea. Backhand index pointing right, plant a tree. A small action. A quiet beginning. But over time, that single idea turned into millions of trees. Millions of lives changed. Millions of hearts inspired. A life that redefined leadership. Wangari showed the world that leadership is not about power. It is about purpose. Not about control. But about service. She proved that even one person can stand against powerful systems and win. The true meaning of courage. Her journey was not easy. She faced arrests, violence, criticism, fear. But she never stopped. Because true courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it. A legacy beyond time. Even today, in Kenya and beyond, her legacy lives. In every tree planted. In every voice raised for justice. In every person who chooses to make a difference. The world she changed. Because of her. People understand the connection between environment and survival. Nature and peace. Action and change. Her work didn't just change land. It changed thinking. The message that lives forever. If her story could be told in one message, it would be this. Backhand index pointing right, never underestimate the power of your actions. Because change does not always begin with power. Sometimes it begins with a single step. A final reflection. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a world without her actions. Fewer trees. Weaker communities. Less hope. Now open your eyes. That difference is her legacy. The story that continues. Even though her life has ended, her story continues. In you. In me. In everyone who chooses to care. Because stories like hers are never truly over. Wangari Maathai did not just plant trees. She planted hope. She planted courage. She planted a future. And that future will continue to grow.